Are librarians ruining comics? Well, some seem to think so. Let's figure that out. Hey there, this is Perch. In the grand scheme of things, I'm not surprised that much by various claims of what's going on in the comic industry and what's working and what isn't. But this one has got me a little bit. I would love to get to one of the people who really believes this, and I feel like I'm missing something in the story. This is one of those cases where I'm going to react to something, and I feel like I've missed part of the plot, so I'm reacting a little out of ignorance. But one of the questions I got was, why are librarians? The question was exactly this: why are librarians or people who work in libraries ruining comics by deliberately ordering and demanding garbage comics? And um, I don't know. I just don't know on this. I think there are several things wrong with the whole premise, but let's try and dive into it. So, number one, how are librarians even involved in all this? Well, libraries will order comics from a variety of sources. I think there are different ways that libraries can get books. One of the most common ones is donations, by the way, but libraries can get books, and librarians have a increased, I would say, need to have graphic novels, not comics, but graphic novels in libraries because there's demand. Kids are wanting them, and librarians can also request to publishers, or they'll say these are the kinds of things I'm interested in. And there's various book fairs, and there's organizations of librarians that will and people who represent the librarian society that will kind of come together and will talk about what they'd like, what should they have in the library, kind of what books they should have. And the teaching profession, I should say, should come as no surprise to anybody, tends to be more left wing if you really have to tag it as such. And I'm not, not really at the university level, but really anywhere. And I'm so tired of the whole people in schools are left wing and they're polluting our children and making them crazy and that kind of stuff. I mean, um, education and kind of the arts that go along with it have always been more left leaning, and there's good reasons why. It's been that's seen as, learning and education is often seen as more of a progressive trait. I don't think that should be a I don't know, that's when I say things like that, it always offends people, but I'm not saying it to say, well, then the counterpart is old conservatives who are like, dumb cavemen who want to drag women around by their hair. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, typically when you're teaching kind of the next generation coming up, the new students, you're typically, you're trying to, in some ways, trying to bond with these kids. You're trying to kind of forecast your mind into what their interests are, and you're trying to maintain your own kind of sense of self and what your subject is, what you're trying to teach. And that does create, kind of by its very nature, more progressive, more new ideas, if you will. And not all those ideas are tested and proven. And the other fact, I think, again, my father was an educator, so I feel comfortable saying this. He said it as well. It's not, there's this phrase that say those who can't, those who can do, those who can't teach, and that's a very rough way of saying it. That is not fair. I think people can have a passion for teaching. My father certainly did. But it is true that, if you're in one of these kinds of big, money making fields, you can, if you're a genius programmer, then you would be working at Amazon or Microsoft or Google. You'd be working there and you'd be making, 350, 400,000 a year as just an average programmer. But if you're not, so if you're a junior pro, you're going to go there. So if you're working at a school in like a, middle school computer lab making 45,000 a year, I mean, I'm just saying, I take, any smart person would take the higher paying job. But there's always reasons why, maybe they don't. Maybe they're, one out of the rat race. Maybe they love teaching. Lots of reasons. But how's this come across to comics and librarians? Well, it's not uncommon that certainly librarians and teachers and others will want to get books that are kind of billed as not necessarily more progressive, but more different or new. So if you present the school with like, hey, would you like this kind of this graphic novel of Spider-Man hunted? It's Spider-Man and he's hunting. Craven is out to get him, and he may not survive. It's going to be deadly. Several of the villains are going to be killed and murdered, and Spider-Man's going to have to defend them. Or over here, we've got Miss Marvel, and it's a book about a Muslim American teenager who's trying to juggle her superhero identity and her faith. Yeah, the librarian in the school is going to go for the Miss Marvel one, 50 times over Spider-Man. And they're going to do that because they're trying to check multiple boxes. They're trying to say, okay, we're trying to show some cultural diversity. We're trying to teach people about sense of self. We're trying to, all these kinds of things. If you build a Spider-Man graphic novel as, hey, this graphic novel is about Spider-Man, and in this he is going to learn that he has a multiracial child that came from kind of one of his adventures some time ago, and he's now juggling fatherhood and what it means to be responsible as a superhero while also immersing himself in a different culture. Yeah, the schools are going to order that one like crazy, sure, because they don't. The schools are going to have a hard time justifying. Here's a comic or a graphic novel that just features Captain America kicking ass for some period of time. It's why, and probably this is why Marvel and to some extent DC, but more Marvel has courted creators who write for the Atlantic and are able to put together a. If you think about it this way, have you ever pick up a book and you turn it over and you read the back jacket or the inside front jacket, and it kind of goes through the 2 paragraph kind of this is what the story's about. All right. So go to an old Stephen King book and read that front jacket if you can find one, because the old ones describe that book a whole lot differently than the new ones and the reprintings do. But you read that jacket and you'll notice that they're trying to make the book sound, bigger than it is. It's like, if you had John Wick, the novel, you might see an inside jacket that would go, a man struggling to escape from a life of danger and PTSD, stress, is exploring kind of a new sense of self, but is reluctantly drug into a emotional turmoil of conflict when his animal companion is caught in the crossfire and he must make a decision to himself and to others. Uh, you know, as opposed to kind of more accurate jacket, which is Keanu Reeves shoots the living hell out of all kinds of people because somebody killed his dog. See, the one sounds more artsy than the other, and the artsy one is going to be more is going to appeal to schools. I'll just put it that way. They should hire me in these companies. I can take any crap that they write and I can make it sound all fluffy, and then they'd sell it to more libraries. But anyway, so the librarians are looking for more of these kinds of things. They're very enamored by things like Miss Marvel, things that show kind of female empowerment, which relates to some of the funding and things they're trying to do with STEM. They'll like Iceman, where they're going to have a kind of homosexual coming of age story or, coming to sense of self story. They're looking for that really good back cover 2 paragraph thing. They're not looking at the comic. None of these people are going to actually read the comic. They're looking for something that kind of fits the bill of being, something that will sound like it's, a comic book, but still artsy, still kind of educational for students, still providing some bigger value. And they don't want to go all the way. They don't want to go to like Watchmen, where it's like a dangerous socio-political look at superheroes run amok with scenes of rape. They're not. Nobody's going to do that. They're like, that's too far. They're too far. Got to pull it back. So So what does this all mean? Are librarians ruining comics? Well, no, because they're just yes, there are comics being ordered through that channel, but not nearly enough to quote unquote ruin comics. The librarian, the librarian group, that coalition, that super PAC is just it's not big enough to ruin comics. It's kind of an absurd, ludicrous statement. Does it mean that schools are getting more copies of Miss Marvel than, say, Batman or, Spider-Man, yeah, absolutely. Does that kind of suck for kids who want to read Batman? Sure, but I would argue that maybe the kids should just go to the comic store and buy those copies of Batman and not try and find them in the school libraries. Now, interestingly enough, if you go to the actual public library, most public libraries will have the Batman and the popular stuff. They will generally carry the popular stuff because a, it's being donated, or b, the library. But the public library is under a lot less pressure than the school library to go for artsy stuff. They're just trying to go for books people will check out. That's what they're going for. A little bit more like a business, not completely. But all of this is to say, I mean, yeah, there are a lot of schools, there are a lot of libraries. Certain books that do not sell on the in the direct market have a different life in the library, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a normal thing. Now, it's a bad thing if the publisher is stupid enough to, pay only attention to the library and never pay attention to the direct market and just pump out a bunch of nonsensical crap that's designed to, really relate and land with 1/30th of its market, but no publisher would be stupid enough to do anything like that. I'm just going to be quiet here for a little while. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, click the bell for notification, comments below. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch, and thanks for listening.